Reading from Leviticus chapter 27 verses 1 to 3. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, if anyone makes a special vow to the Lord involving the valuation of persons, the valuation of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary." Verse 30 onwards. Every tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the trees, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. If a man wishes to redeem some of his tithe, he shall add a fifth to it. And every tithe of herds and flocks, every 10th animal of all that pass under the herdsman's staff shall be holy to the Lord. One shall not differentiate between good or bad, neither shall he make a substitute for it. And if he does substitute for it, then both it and the substitute shall be holy, it shall not be redeemed. These are the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses for the people of Israel on Mount Sinai. We have come to the final chapter of the book of Leviticus. The whole of this book is part of the revelation that God gave to Moses at Mount Sinai. This chapter deals in thorough fashion with all the kinds of things which men may promise to dedicate to God. A vow is a promise to dedicate a specific offering in the future, motivated by gratitude for God's grace in the life of the offerer, or in order to beseech God's help in a time of crisis. Numerous examples of vows similar to those in Leviticus 27 can be found in the Bible. In Genesis 28, we read about the vow that Jacob made to God that he will pay his tithes to him if he would bless and keep him. In Numbers chapter 21, we read about the Canaanite king of Arad, when the Israelites fought with them, and they vowed to utterly destroy their cities if God gave them victory. In Judges 13, we read about the Nazarite vow of Samson, and then in the most tragic vow of the scriptures, we see Jephthah, who vowed to offer God the first thing to come from his tent to greet him, which proved to be his only daughter. Hannah vowed that if God gave her a son, she would give him to the Lord all his life. We have see Jonah's vow at the belly of the great fish in Jonah chapter 2 verse 9. In New Testament also we find that Paul continued to make vows and fulfill them, as we read in Acts chapter 18 and verse chapter 21. We see in these verses vows regarding people, animals, houses, family inheritance, non-family land, and illicit vows. Notably, one cannot vow a resource that is already the Lord's. Therefore, the tithes that already belong to the Lord could not be dedicated to the Lord as a vow either. From these instructions in Leviticus chapter 27, we gather few important principles. Number one, real giving is voluntary and not by compulsion or obligation. The tithe is the Lord's, and there is no voluntary element involved in its payment. But a vow or a promise comes from a cheerful heart towards God. Notice the phrase, if a man vows. Real giving starts only after tithing. Number two, making and keeping a vow to God is pleasing to Him. In Psalm 50 verse 14 and 15 we read, "Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, you shall glorify me." Number three, God makes a provision to redeem a vow by paying the prescribed penalty according to the value of the vow. Despite the stipulation that one should keep a vow promised to the Lord, He shows mercy if the one who vowed did so hastily or without due consideration of his capacity to pay his vows. We see His mercy towards a fallen man. Number four, nobody would be restrained from keeping their vows on account of poverty, because the priest would make a special valuation on his behalf. It is within everyone's reach to consecrate themselves or their property in part or in full to God. Making a vow to God is not a means of escaping the just consequences of one's offense against one's fellow men deserving death. Number six, God is concerned about our promises. God is an utterly faithful God who never changes His word. One characteristic of a man who is worthy to stand in God's holy place is that he swears to his own hurt and changes not. God said through Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 21 to 23, "When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for it would be sin in you. And the Lord your God will surely require it of you. However, if you refrain from vowing, it would not be sin in you. You shall be careful to perform what goes out from your lips, just as you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised." In Proverbs 20, verse 25, we read, "It is a snare for a man to say rashly, 'It is holy,' and after the vows to make inquiry." In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 4 to 7, the preacher says, "When you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Do not let your speech cause you to sin, and do not say in the presence of the messenger of God that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For in many dreams and in many words there is emptiness. Rather fear God." Number 7. This text also warns us not to push others to make vows to God, which they may later neglect or regret when the tide of strong feeling has ebbed. The tithes and vows remind us that in daily life, all our actions, all our prosperity, our distresses, and our cries should all turn us to God, the source of our life. There is no situation in which we cannot call upon Him from a humble heart and expect His help. And there is no situation where we have received His help where we should not be grateful. A real vow is a voluntary act of dedication, coming out of a cheerful heart and executed with careful planning. It is costly, and its fulfillment pleases God by its sincerity of gratitude, without external compulsion or internal reluctance or sense of obligation. God does not demand vows, but once you have made it, He expects you to keep it. Let our yes be yes and our no be no. God bless.